The man who called himself Rick Hanson had been traveling for 17 hours. He came off the night train from Genoa like a piece of cargo delivered to the wrong dock. Marseille in February was wet concrete and diesel fumes, and the kind of cold that found the gaps in a coat. The station at St. Charles sat high above the city, and the wind off the Mediterranean cut straight up the hill. He stood at the edge of the platform and let the air hit him. Smelled salt and rust and exhaust. Heard the groan of a ferry horn somewhere down in the Via port. He was large. That was the first thing people noticed when they noticed him at all. 6'3", 230, all of it hard-packed from 20 years of carrying the weight of a uniform and the weight of what that uniform meant. But he moved like a man who had learned to take up less space than he occupied. Shoulders rolled forward, steps measured, eyes down until they needed to be up. He carried a duffel bag, olive drab, faded, the strap worn through at the stitching on one side. Inside, a spare pair of boots, 2 pairs of jeans, 3 t-shirts, a thin waterproof jacket, a toiletry kit, a paperback novel with the spine broken, and a passport that said he was an American citizen. Another passport in the same bag said he was Italian. Both were real. The Italian one was the one he used most. Fewer questions in Europe. His pension was small, $1,500 a month, direct deposit into a bank account in Frankfurt that he checked every 2 weeks, enough for a bed and a meal and a train ticket, not enough for anything else. That was the point. He had spent 20 years being owned by the United States Navy, master at arms, law enforcement and security aboard some of the largest ships in the world. He had broken up fights, confiscated drugs, stood watch over armories, and once in a port in Bahrain had put a man through a bulkhead with a single punch. The man had been a contractor, had been reaching for a weapon he didn't have the authority to carry. The investigation had been clean, but the look in that man's eyes afterward, that stayed. The way his body had folded. The way the air went out of him before he hit the deck. He had walked away at 20 years exactly. Not because he was done, because he was tired of being told where to stand. The Navy had trained him to see everything and react to nothing until the moment required it. He had been good at that. Good at reading a room before anyone in it knew they were being read. Good at the math of distance and angle and time. Good at the cold arithmetic of violence. The equation that said if a man moved left, he was open, and if he moved right, he was dead. That skill didn't go away when the uniform came off. It just sat deeper. He had no fixed address. That was the other thing. No lease, no mailbox, no utility bill in his name. He moved through Europe on temporary jobs, security for a shipping company in Rotterdam, a bouncer at a club in Berlin, 3 weeks of cash-in-hand construction work outside Valencia. He never stayed long enough to be known, never left a mark. The rooms he rented were cheap. The beds were hard. The coffee was instant. He ate when he was hungry and stopped when he was full, and he didn't think much about the next day until the next day arrived. The footsteps belonged to someone else, a man in a blue jacket walking fast, phone pressed to his ear. Rick watched him without turning his head, saw the tension in the shoulders, the way the man's free hand kept opening and closing. A problem, but not Rick's problem, not yet. He had learned to see those small signals in the service. A master-at-arms on a ship of 5,000 souls learned to read the temperature of a crowd the way a pilot read instruments. The shift in posture, the flick of the eyes, the way a group of sailors would go quiet when he walked past, not because they were afraid of him, but because they recognized that he was watching. And that he would remember. He had been called a lot of things over those 20 years. Hard-ass, robot. The kind of man who could stand in the middle of a riot and make it stop by sheer presence. None of it was accurate. He was just a man who had learned that most problems could be solved by being patient and being large and being willing to be the last one to move. He walked down the steps from the station toward the lower city. The wind died in the narrow streets. The air smelled of bread and garbage and diesel. A scooter buzzed past, the rider leaning into the turn without looking. Rick stepped aside without breaking stride. The scooter's exhaust hung in the air for a moment and then dispersed. He had no plan for Marseille beyond the next few weeks. A man he had met in a bar in Barcelona had mentioned a job, Warehouse security, night shift, cash paid weekly. The man had given him a name and an address on a napkin. The napkin was still in Rick's coat pocket, the ink smudged from a rain shower in Genoa. He would find the address tomorrow. Tonight he needed a bed. He turned down a side street where the buildings leaned toward each other, blocking out the sky. A hotel sign flickered at the far end. Hotel Dorient, the letters yellowed, the neon buzzing. He walked toward it. The door was heavy, the handle worn smooth. Inside, the lobby smelled of cigarette smoke and old carpet, and the faint chemical tang of cleaning solution that had been applied too many times. The man at the desk was in his 60s with a face like a crumpled paper bag and a cigarette burning in an ashtray beside the register. He looked up, saw Rick, did the calculation that most people did. Big man, late 40s, clean clothes but worn, no luggage except the duffel, drifter or cop. The man's eyes narrowed. Rick held up 2 fingers, "Do naughty." The desk man nodded, didn't ask for identification, cash up front, 36 euros. Rick counted it out from the fold of notes in his front pocket. The man slid a key across the counter. Room 12, 2nd floor, shared bathroom at the end of the hall. The room was small. A bed with a thin mattress, a wooden chair, a sink with a mirror, a window that looked out onto a courtyard where a single bare bulb hung from a wire. The paint was the color of weak tea. The radiator ticked and hissed. He dropped the duffel on the chair, sat on the edge of the bed and tested the mattress with his palm. Soft in the middle. He would sleep on the floor. He had slept on worse. He stayed up for another hour. Sat in the dark, looking out the window at the courtyard, listening to the sounds of the city, a distant argument, a dog barking, the rumble of a truck down near the docks. He thought about nothing in particular. That was the skill he had practiced hardest after leaving the service, the ability to be still, to be empty, to let the world move around him without needing to touch it. Tomorrow he would find the warehouse. He would meet the man. He would take the job. He would stand in a dark room for 8 hours and watch the door and think about nothing. And then he would find the next train and the next city and the next room with a bed he didn't sleep in. This was the life he had chosen. It was not a good life. It was not a bad life. It was a life that required nothing from him except that he stay out of trouble. Trouble, as it turned out, was already in Marseilles, and trouble had a way of finding men who stood still in the dark. He woke before dawn. The room was cold, the radiator silent. He had slept on the floor with his duffel under his head, his coat spread over him like a blanket. The floor was harder than the bed, but it was honest. No surprises in the middle of the night. He stood, stretched, worked the stiffness out of his shoulders. The window showed a pale gray sky over the courtyard. The single bulb had burned out sometime in the night. He dressed in the dark, packed the duffel, and left the key on the desk where the night clerk was asleep in a chair, mouth open, snoring softly. The streets were empty. A baker was opening his shutters 2 blocks over. The smell of fresh bread drifted on the damp air. Rick walked toward the docks, following the pull of the sea. The buildings grew older, the streets narrower. A cat watched him from a windowsill, unblinking. He found the bar from the napkin at 7:30. Le Mistral, a narrow front with a faded awning and a neon sign that said bière in letters that had lost most of their color. The door was locked. He checked the hours painted on the glass. Opens at 9. He had time. He found a bench near the waterfront and sat. The harbor was quiet at this hour. A few fishing boats at the quay, their lights reflecting on black water. The air smelled of diesel and salt and the iodine tang of wet rope. He watched a man in rubber boots coil a line, slow and methodical, the same motion repeated until it was perfect. Rick understood that kind of patience. At 9 he walked back. The bar was open. A man in his 50s stood behind the counter, wiping a glass with a rag that might once have been white. He looked up when the door opened, saw Rick, did the calculation, drifter, no threat. He went back to wiping the glass. Rick ordered a coffee. The man poured it from a stained pot, black, strong, bitter. Rick paid with a €2 coin and left the coin on the counter. "I'm looking for Elaine," he said, "the warehouse job." The man stopped wiping, looked at Rick again. This time the calculation was different. He set the glass down. "You're the American." Rick didn't correct him. "The man from Barcelona said to ask here." The bar owner nodded. He pointed with his chin toward the back. "Elaine comes in at noon, every day. He'll be at the corner table. You wait, you talk to him." Rick drank his coffee. He left the bar at 9:15. He had time to kill. He walked the docks, learned the layout. The port was a maze of concrete and steel, of warehouses and cranes and containers stacked like children's blocks. He counted the gates, memorized the numbers, noted the security cameras, the guard huts, the patterns of traffic. A man who knew the ground had an advantage. A man who didn't was a liability. He found the warehouse before noon. It was on the eastern edge of the port, a low building of corrugated steel with a faded number painted above the roll-up door. Gate 3. A sign in French and English, Frigo Méditerranée, cold storage. A freezer the size of a football field, probably. He walked past without slowing. Noted the lock. A heavy padlock, industrial grade. Noted the fence. 12 feet topped with razor wire. Noted the yard. Empty at this hour but swept clean. Someone cared about this place. He was back at Le Mistral at 11:50. He took a table near the window, ordered a coffee, and waited. The coffee came in a small cup. He drank it slowly, watched the door. At 12:05 a man walked in, mid-50s, 5'10", maybe 170 pounds, gray hair cropped short, a face that had seen weather and work. He wore a canvas jacket and work boots that had been resoled more than once. He walked to the corner table without looking at anyone. Sat. The bar owner brought him a pastis without being asked. Rick waited 2 minutes. Then he stood, walked to the corner table, and sat down across from the man. The man looked up. His eyes were pale blue, the color of winter sky. He studied Rick the way a man studies a used car, looking for rust, looking for hidden damage. He didn't find any. "You're the American," he said, same words, same tone. "The man in Barcelona said you needed a night guard." Elaine nodded, drank his pastis, set the glass down. "You done this before?" 20 years in the Navy, master at arms, I've done a lot of things." Elaine considered that. "You know what we store?" "Cold storage, food probably, maybe pharmaceuticals." Elaine's mouth twitched, not a smile but close. "Frozen fish, cargo from the boats, packed and shipped inland, nothing valuable, nothing worth stealing." Rick said nothing. "The job is simple," Elaine said. "You sit in the guard hut at Gate 3. You check the trucks in and out. You log the time and the plate number. You walk the perimeter every hour. You stay awake. You don't drink. You don't smoke in the hut. You don't bring friends." Rick nodded. "Cash, €100 a night. 7 nights on, 7 off. You sleep in the back room if you want. There's a cot, a microwave, a toilet." Rick considered the math. €700 a week. Enough to save, enough to move on. A cot was better than a floor. "When do I start?" Elaine finished his pastis. "Tonight, 8 o'clock. The night shift manager will show you the ropes. His name is Dumas. He's a good man. He doesn't like surprises." Rick stood. "I'll be there." He left the bar. The sun had broken through the clouds, weak and pale. He walked back toward the port. He had 7 hours to fill. He found a cafe near the train station, ate a sandwich, drank 2 more coffees, sat in the corner and watched the room. The waitress was young, tired, efficient. A man at the bar was nursing a beer and staring at nothing. 2 old men played cards at a table near the window, their hands moving with the slow precision of long habit. Rick watched them without watching. He noted the exits, the angles, the light. At 7:30 he walked to the warehouse. The sun was low, the sky orange and pink. The yard was empty. The roll-up door was closed. He walked to the guard hut at Gate 3. A man sat inside reading a newspaper by the light of a single bulb. He looked up when Rick approached, opened the door. "You're the American," he said, 3rd time. Rick was getting used to it. "Dumas." The man nodded. He was younger than Elaine, early 40s, dark hair, dark eyes, a face that was built for smiling but wasn't smiling now. He was wearing a uniform shirt with the company logo. He looked Rick up and down, then held out a clipboard. "Sign here, name, date, time." Rick signed. His handwriting was neat, plain, no flourishes. Dumas took the clipboard back. "You walk the perimeter every hour. You check the freezer doors. You log the trucks. You see anything unusual, you call the office. The number is on the wall." He pointed to a phone mounted on the wall of the hut. An old model, the cord curled like a snake. "You got questions?" Rick shook his head. Dumas nodded. "Good." He picked up his jacket. "I'm off at 8. You'll be alone until 6 in the morning. The foreman comes in at 7. Any problems, you call." He walked out. The door swung shut behind him. The lock clicked. Rick stood in the hut for a moment. He looked at the phone, the logbook, the chair, the bulb. The window faced the gate and the yard beyond. He could see the freezer building, a low rectangle of white-painted concrete, no windows, a single heavy door at the far end. The yard was empty. The fence was dark. The lights were few. He sat in the chair. It was metal with a thin cushion. It would be uncomfortable by morning. He didn't mind. He looked at his watch. 7:52. 8 minutes until his shift started. He leaned back, let his eyes adjust to the dark. The night stretched ahead of him, empty and quiet. He would sit. He would watch. He would think about nothing. That was the plan. But the plan, like most plans, would not survive the night. The freezer door was a thick slab of metal painted white with a heavy latch and a wheel lock. He watched it from the hut. Nothing moved. No light. No sound. At 9:15 he made his first perimeter walk. The yard was 100 meters across, 50 deep. Concrete, fence, 2 buildings, 3 lights, 1 gate. He counted the steps, 243 to complete the circuit. The fence was chain link topped with barbed wire, old, rust in the corners. A section near the far end had been patched with new mesh. The patch was recent. The wire was still bright. He filed it. At 10:30 he heard voices. He looked up from the logbook. A small group of men was crossing the yard from the direction of the main building. 4 of them, walking slow, hands in pockets. They stopped at the freezer door. One of them pulled a key from his pocket, opened the lock, pulled the wheel. The door swung open. A cold vapor spilled out. One man stepped inside, the others waited. A minute passed. The man came back out carrying a cardboard box, small, sealed with tape. Rick watched, said nothing. The man with the key locked the door. The group turned, walked back toward the main building. They didn't look at the gate, didn't look at the hut. Rick noted the time, 10:34. The men's faces, one older, 3 younger. The older man had a beard, gray. The younger ones were clean-shaven. 2 of them were wearing forklift driver's vests. The third was in a plain jacket. He wrote nothing in the logbook. There was no truck, no delivery, no pickup. At midnight he made another circuit. The yard was still. The air was cold and damp. The lights hummed. His footsteps echoed off the concrete. He stopped at the freezer door, checked the latch, the lock, both secure. He stood there for a moment, listened, nothing. He walked back to the hut, poured himself a cup of coffee from the thermos he'd bought at the cafe. It was cold. He drank it anyway. At 1:15 he saw movement near the main building. A door opened. A figure stepped out, small, quick. It crossed the yard, keeping to the shadows, heading for the freezer. Rick watched. The figure reached the door, pulled a key, unlocked it. The figure slipped inside. The door closed behind him. Rick waited 2 minutes, 3. The door opened again. The figure came out carrying a box, smaller than the one from earlier. The figure locked the door, turned, started walking back toward the main building. Rick left the hut, walked across the yard. He didn't hurry. His footsteps were steady on the concrete. The figure heard him, stopped, turned. It was a kid, young, early 20s, dark hair, dark eyes, a thin face. He was wearing a forklift driver's vest. The box was tucked under his arm. "Hey," the kid said. His voice was high, nervous. "You're the new guy." Rick stopped about 6 feet away. "What's in the box?" The kid's eyes flicked left, then right. Nothing, just supplies for the night shift. Supplies? Yeah, you know, coffee, sugar, stuff. Rick looked at the box. It was taped shut. No labels, no markings. The kid's hands were shaking. You're Mattias, Rick said. The kid blinked. How do you know my name? I saw the roster in the office. Mattias swallowed. His throat moved up and down. Look, I don't want any trouble. I'm just doing my job. Your job is driving a forklift. Yeah, that's right. I'm a forklift driver. Rick said nothing. Mattias shifted his weight. The box moved under his arm. I have to go. The foreman's waiting. He tried to step around Rick. Rick didn't move. Mattias stopped, looked up at him. His eyes were wide, scared. What are you doing? Mattias said. Thinking. About what? Rick looked at the box, looked at Mattias, looked at the freezer door, then he stepped aside. Go. Mattias moved fast, walked across the yard almost running. The door to the main building opened, swallowed him, closed. Rick stood in the yard for a long moment. The concrete was cold under his boots. The lights hummed. The freezer door was shut, locked, nothing to see. He walked back to the hut, sat in the chair, looked at the phone. The clock on the wall said 1:22. He thought about the kid, the box, the earlier group, the patched fence, the cold vapor spilling out of the freezer. It was not his problem. He was here for 7 nights, €700, a cot, a microwave, a toilet. He leaned back, closed his eyes. The kid's face stayed in his mind. The shaking hands, the scared eyes, the way he'd said supplies like it was a word he'd learned 10 seconds ago. Rick opened his eyes, looked at the phone again. He didn't pick it up. At 2:30 he heard footsteps, fast, running. He stood, moved to the door of the hut, opened it. The yard was dark. The lights were off on the far side. He could see movement near the freezer. 2 figures. One was Mattias. The other was the older man with the gray beard. They were arguing, voices low, sharp. The older man was pointing at the freezer. Mattias was shaking his head. The older man grabbed Mattias by the arm. Mattias pulled away. The older man said something. Mattias stopped, looked at the ground, nodded. The older man walked away. Mattias stood alone in the dark. His shoulders were hunched. His hands were at his sides. Rick watched, waited. Mattias looked up, saw the hut, saw Rick standing in the doorway. He stared for a moment. Then he turned and walked toward the main building, slow, dragging his feet. Rick watched until he was gone. Then he closed the door, sat in the chair. The clock said 2:38. He had 3 hours and 22 minutes until the end of his shift. He didn't sleep. He sat in the dark and listened to the hum of the lights and the distant sound of the sea and the occasional creak of the freezer door settling in its frame. He thought about the kid, the box, the older man, the patched fence. It was not his problem. But he knew, with the certainty of a man who had spent 20 years reading people and situations, that it would become his problem before the week was out. He just didn't know how. Not yet. He got through the rest of that shift on coffee from a vending machine in the main building. 2 cups, black. The machine took coins, gave back stale grounds and hot water that tasted like plastic. He drank it anyway. At 6 the foreman came. Same dull face, same clipboard. He looked at Rick like he was checking a box on a list. Same time tonight, he said. Rick nodded, walked out through the gate. The air was cold. The sky was pale gray. The sea was flat and quiet. He found a cafe near the port. 3 tables outside, nobody sitting at them. Inside was warm, smelled of old oil and fresh bread. He ordered a coffee and a roll, paid with a €5 note, got back 2 coins and a crumpled receipt. He ate slowly, watched the street through the window. A man in a blue work jacket walked past. He didn't look in. He was carrying a newspaper. He turned left at the corner and was gone. Rick finished his coffee, left the cafe, walked to the pension he'd found on the second day, a room above a bakery, narrow bed, a sink, a window that looked onto a courtyard with a dead plant in a pot. The sheets were clean. The walls were thin. He could hear the baker working in the room below, the slap of dough on a counter. He lay on the bed. His boots were off. His duffel bag was on the floor next to the bed. He looked at the ceiling. It was yellowed. A crack ran from the corner to the light fixture. He counted his cash, 460 euros. The room was 30 a night. He had 7 nights of work, 700 euros more cash end of shift. He could stay for another week after that if he was careful, maybe 2. He closed his eyes. He slept for 4 hours. When he woke, the light through the window had changed. The courtyard was in shadow. The baker was quiet. He sat up, rubbed his face, drank water from the sink, put his boots back on. He walked to the port, found a different cafe, a sandwich and a beer. The beer was cold. The bread was stale. He ate it anyway. The second night was the same as the first. The same hut, the same chair, the same phone that didn't ring, the same hum from the lights, the same sound of the sea, faint and constant. At 1 in the morning, a van pulled into the yard. White, no markings. It drove to the freezer, stopped. The engine idled. 2 men got out. They were wearing coveralls. They opened the back of the van, pulled out a pallet jack, rolled it to the freezer door. Rick watched from the hut, kept his hands in his lap, didn't move. The freezer door opened. The cold vapor spilled out, thick and white. The men rolled the pallet jack inside. They came out a few minutes later with a pallet stacked with boxes, same size as the one Matthias had carried. No labels, no markings. They loaded the pallet into the van, closed the doors, got in. The van drove out. The gate closed behind it. The yard was quiet again. Rick looked at the clock, 1:22. The third night he saw Matthias again. The kid was walking across the yard with another box, same size, same way of carrying it. His head was down, his shoulders were tight. Rick stepped out of the hut. Matthias saw him, stopped. His mouth opened, closed. "You're still here," Matthias said. "Still here," Rick said. Matthias looked at the box in his hands, looked at the freezer, then back at Rick. "You don't ask questions," Matthias said. It wasn't a question. "I'm here to watch the gate." "Right," Matthias shifted the box. "Right, the gate." He walked away, fast. His steps were quick and uneven on the concrete. Rick watched him go, then he followed, not close, just far enough to see. Matthias went to the main building. The door opened. He went inside. The door closed. Rick stood in the yard. The air was cold. The lights hummed. He could see the freezer door at the far end of the yard. It was closed. The padlock was on it, same as before. He walked to the fence on the far side, the one with the patch. He looked at it. The wire was cut clean. The patch was new. The tie wires holding it were still bright. He looked at the ground underneath. Tracks, tire tracks, narrow, a motorcycle maybe, or a small scooter. They led from the fence toward the freezer, then turned and went back. He crouched, looked at the tracks. They were fresh. The dirt was still loose around the edges. He stood, walked back to the hut, sat in the chair, looked at the phone. It was not his problem. He thought about the van, the boxes, the tracks, the kid with the shaking hands, the older man with the gray beard. He thought about the patched fence, the fresh tire tracks, the cold vapor spilling out of the freezer door. He leaned back, closed his eyes. The fourth night he counted the men. There were 6. The foreman, the older man with the gray beard, a younger man who looked like he lifted weights but didn't think much, a thin man with glasses who carried a clipboard, 2 others who stayed in the background watching. Rick mapped them. The older man was the one who gave orders. The thin man with the glasses took notes. The younger man was muscle. The 2 in the background were drivers or loaders. Matthias was the one who carried the boxes. Rick watched the pattern. The van came at 1, another van at 2, a third at 3:30. Each time the same routine. The freezer opened. The boxes went in. The van left. The freezer was locked again. Each time Matthias was there, carrying, loading. His face was pale. His hands were shaking. Each time the older man watched. His eyes were flat. His hands were in his pockets. The 5th night Rick counted the boxes. 37, all the same size, all unmarked, all going into the freezer or coming out of it. He thought about the cold, the vapor, the way the freezer door sealed tight. He thought about what you needed a freezer for in a place like this, a place that processed fish, a place that had a patched fence, a place where a kid carried boxes with no labels. He thought about the kid's face, the way he'd said supplies like it was a word he'd learned 10 seconds ago. He looked at the clock, 3:47. He had 2 hours and 13 minutes until the end of his shift. He didn't sleep. He sat in the dark and listened to the sound of the sea and the hum of the lights and the quiet creak of the freezer door settling in its frame. He thought about the box, the kid, the older man. He knew, with the certainty of a man who had spent 20 years reading people and situations, that it would become his problem before the week was out. He just didn't know when. But he knew it would be soon. The 6th night the air changed, not the weather, the temperature inside the yard, the way men moved, the way they didn't look at each other. Rick felt it the moment he stepped through the gate. The foreman was standing by the hut. His arms were crossed. His eyes were on the freezer. "You're early," the foreman said. "Shift starts at 10. The foreman looked at his watch, looked at Rick, looked at the freezer again. "Stay in the hut tonight." Rick said nothing, just walked past him, sat in the chair. The foreman didn't follow, just stood there, watching. Rick looked at the yard through the hut's window. The older man with the gray beard was there. He was talking to the thin man with the glasses. The thin man was nodding. His clipboard was pressed against his chest like a shield. Footsteps fast, uneven. Rick looked up. Matthias was at the door. His face was white. His eyes were wide. "I need to talk to you." Rick stood, stepped outside. Matthias was breathing hard. His hands were in his pockets. His shoulders were hunched. "Not here," Matthias said. "Around back by the fence." Rick followed. They walked past the freezer, past the stack of pallets, to the patch fence. The tire tracks were still there, fainter now, but still there. Matthias stopped, turned, looked at Rick. His mouth was dry. He licked his lips. "They're blaming me," Matthias said. "The missing cargo, they say I took it." "Did you?" "No," the word came out fast, too fast. "No, I just carry the boxes, that's all I do. I don't open them, I don't count them, I just carry them." "Who says you took them?" "The old man, the one with the beard. He told the foreman. He said I was the only one who could have done it, because I'm the one who carries the boxes." Rick looked at the fence, the patch, the tire tracks. He looked at Matthias. "How many boxes went missing?" "6. When?" "2 nights ago, the second van. The driver said he was short, said he was supposed to get 26 and he only got 20. Rick thought about the numbers, 26, 20, 6 missing. The math was simple, the question was the route. Who drives the vans? Different guys every time. They don't use the same crew twice. Who picks the drivers? Matthias looked at the ground, then back at Rick, the old man. Rick nodded. He looked at the freezer. The door was closed. The padlock was on it, the same padlock, the same door, the same routine. "What's in the boxes?" Matthias's face went tighter. His hands came out of his pockets. He twisted them together. "I don't know." "You have a guess?" Matthias looked at the ground, then at the fence, then at the sea beyond. His voice was low. "Fish." Rick waited. "Frozen fish," Matthias said. "That's what they told me. High-end stuff for restaurants, but it doesn't smell like fish. And the boxes don't have labels, and the vans don't have refrigeration." "What do they smell like?" Matthias swallowed. "Nothing, they don't smell like anything, they're just cold." Rick looked at the freezer. The vapor was still spilling from the door, thin, white, cold. "The old man," Rick said. "What's his name?" "Lucien." "Last name?" "I don't know, no one uses it, just Lucien." "Who does he answer to?" Matthias looked at the ground, then at Rick. His eyes were dark. I don't know, but he talks to someone on the phone every night. After the last van leaves, he goes to the office. He closes the door. I can hear his voice through the wall, but I can't make out the words. What time? Around 4, always around 4. Rick looked at his watch, 3:51. Go back to work, Rick said. Act normal. They're going to fire me, maybe worse. Not tonight. Matthias looked at him, held his gaze, then nodded, turned, walked back toward the main building. His steps were slower now, dragging. Rick stayed by the fence, counted the minutes. At 4:03 he walked toward the main building. The door was closed. The light was on in the office. He could see the shape of a man through the frosted glass. The silhouette was talking. The head was moving. The hand was gesturing. Rick stood just outside the door. The voice was low, muffled. He could hear the rhythm, the pauses, the tone. Then a vibration. A phone, not the one in the office. Another one, closer. Rick turned. The thin man with the glasses was standing behind him. His hand was in his pocket. His eyes were on Rick. You're not supposed to be here. I'm looking for the bathroom. The thin man's hand came out of his pocket. He was holding a phone. The screen was lit. He looked at it, then at Rick. The bathroom is by the gate. I must have taken a wrong turn. The thin man's eyes were flat. His thumb was on the phone. He wasn't looking at the screen. He was looking at Rick. Lucien wants to see you. I'm working. Not anymore. Rick looked at the thin man, then at the office door. The silhouette was still there, still talking. The hand was still gesturing. After his call, the thin man didn't move. His thumb stayed on the phone. Now, he said. Rick walked toward the office. The thin man followed. His footsteps were light, careful, the kind of footsteps a man makes when he's trying not to make noise. Rick opened the door. The office was small, a desk, a chair, a phone on the desk. Lucien was standing with his back to the door. The phone was at his ear. He heard the door, turned. His eyes were flat, cold, the color of winter sea. I'll call you back, he said. He put the phone down, looked at Rick, looked at the thin man behind him. Leave us, Lucien said. The thin man closed the door. The latch clicked. Rick stood in the middle of the room. Lucien sat behind the desk. He didn't offer a chair. You've been here 6 nights. 7. 7, Lucien nodded. And you've seen things. I've seen a yard, a freezer, a kid carrying boxes. That's all. That's all. Lucien looked at him. The eyes didn't blink. The kid is a problem, Lucien said. He's nervous, he talks too much, he's not reliable. He's young. He's a liability. Rick said nothing, just stood, waited. Lucien leaned back in his chair. The wood creaked. I need someone who can watch, who can keep their mouth shut, who can handle a situation if it comes up. I watch the gate. I know what you do, Lucien's voice was flat, and I know what you used to do. Rick looked at him, waited. Navy, Lucien said. Master at arms, 20 years, honorable discharge, no wife, no kids, no ties. That's public record. It is, Lucien smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. You drift, you take temporary jobs, you don't ask questions. That's right. I'm offering you a permanent one. Rick looked at him, then at the phone on the desk. The line was still open. The call was still waiting. What's the job? You take the kid's place. You carry the boxes. You load the vans. You don't talk to anyone about what you see. You get paid in cash, triple what you're making now. Rick thought about the numbers. Triple cash, no questions. And the kid? Lucien's eyes went cold again. The kid goes home. Tonight he's done. Rick looked at the door. He could hear the thin man's footsteps outside, pacing, waiting. I'll think about it, Rick said. You have until the end of your shift. Rick turned, opened the door, walked out. The thin man was standing by the wall. His hand was in his pocket again. Rick walked past him, across the yard, past the freezer, past the patch fence, back to the hut. He sat in the chair, looked at the clock, 4:19. He thought about the kid, the boxes, the cold, the missing cargo, the tire tracks, the phone call, the man with the flat eyes. He thought about the math. Triple the pay, cash, no questions. He thought about what you had to do to earn that kind of money. He thought about the kid, the way his hands shook, the way he'd said supplies like a word he'd learned 10 seconds ago. He leaned back in the chair. He had 1 hour and 41 minutes. He watched the clock. The minute hand moved. The fluorescent light hummed. It was a steady sound, a cheap sound. The kind of sound that came with a room that had been put together fast and cheap and never intended to last. Outside, the yard was quiet. The fog had thickened. It hung low over the concrete, gray and wet, swallowing the far end of the lot. The freezer door was closed. The office light was still on. He thought about the kid, about the way he'd said supplies, the way his hands had stayed in his pockets, the way he'd looked at the ground when he talked. He thought about the thin man, the hand in the pocket, the thumb on the phone, the footsteps that didn't want to be heard. He thought about Lucien, the flat eyes, the offer, the math. Triple cash, no questions. The arithmetic was simple, the cost was not. He heard footsteps, heavy, fast, coming across the yard. He stood, moved to the door, opened it. The kid was running. Matthias, his face was white, his eyes were wide, he was heading for the gate. Behind him, 3 men, moving fast. The thin man was one of them, the other 2 were bigger, broader, the kind of men who worked with their hands. Matthias saw Rick, stopped, his breath was ragged. They're going to. The first man hit him from behind, a fist to the kidney. Matthias folded, went down, his knees hit the concrete. The thin man grabbed his collar, pulled him up. The other 2 moved in. Rick watched, counted. Distance, 15 feet, 3 men, the kid was down. The thin man had the collar, the other 2 had their fists ready. He walked. He didn't run, running was noise. Running was panic. He walked steady, even, his boots on the concrete, dry, measured. The thin man saw him first. His eyes shifted, his grip on the collar loosened. "This doesn't concern you," he said. Rick kept walking. Distance, 10 feet. The 2 bigger men turned. They were young, mid-20s, strong, confident. The kind of confidence that came from never having been hit hard enough. "He's leaving," Rick said. The thin man smiled. It was a thin smile, the smile of a man who thought he had the numbers. "He's leaving in a van, in pieces." Rick stopped. Distance, 6 feet. He could see the kid's face, blood from his nose, a cut above his eye, his hands were shaking. "He's walking out the gate," Rick said. "Tonight he's done." The thin man's smile didn't move. His hand went to his pocket, the same pocket, the same hand. Rick was already moving. He took 2 steps. The thin man's hand was still coming out of the pocket. It held a blade, a flick knife. The blade was still folded. Rick's left hand caught the thin man's wrist. Hard, bone on bone. The knife dropped. His right hand came up, palm open, flat. He hit the thin man in the throat. The thin man went down. His hands went to his neck. His mouth was open. No sound came out. His eyes were wide. He was breathing, barely. The 2 bigger men stared. Their fists were still up. Their feet were still planted, but their eyes had changed. The confidence was gone. What was left was calculation, and the calculation was wrong. Rick looked at them. His hands were down, his breathing was even. "He walks," he said, "or you don't." The bigger men looked at each other, then at the thin man on the ground, then at Rick. One of them took a step back, the other followed. Rick looked down at Matthias. The kid was on his knees, his nose was bleeding, his eye was swelling. "Get up." Matthias got up, slow, shaky. Rick looked at the gate. It was 20 feet away. "Walk." Matthias walked. His steps were unsteady. His hands were shaking, but he walked. Rick followed, not close, Not far, just far enough to be between the kid and the men behind them. They reached the gate. Matthias pushed it open. The hinge was stiff, it creaked. He stepped through, into the street, into the fog. Rick stopped at the gate. He looked back. The two bigger men were standing over the thin man. The thin man was on his knees. His hand was still at his throat. His eyes were on Rick. Rick looked at him, said nothing, turned, stepped through the gate. The street was empty. The fog was thick. The kid was 10 feet ahead, walking fast, head down. Rick caught up, walked beside him. They walked in silence, past the closed shops, past the dark windows, past the streetlights that buzzed and flickered. Matthias stopped, turned. His face was a mess, blood from his nose, a swelling eye, a cut lip, but his hands had stopped shaking. Why? Rick looked at him. The kid was young, 22 maybe, old enough to know better, young enough to have made the wrong choices. You need a hospital. No, Matthias wiped his nose with his sleeve. It came away red. I need to know why. Rick looked back toward the yard. The fog had swallowed it, just gray and silence. Because you asked for a job, he said, and you didn't know what you were getting into. Matthias stared at him. His eyes were wet from the blood from something else. I knew, he said. I knew what it was, I just didn't think. You didn't think they'd kill you. Matthias said nothing. Rick looked at the sky. It was dark. The fog was low. The street was wet. He could feel the cold coming up through the concrete. He had no job. He had no bed. He had a duffel bag in a locker at the yard. He had a passport. He had 240 euros. He thought about the math, triple the pay, cash, no questions. He thought about the cost. Go home, he said. Pack your things, leave the city, don't come back. Matthias looked at him. His mouth opened, closed. What about you? Rick looked back toward the yard. The office light was still on. The silhouette was still there. I'm not going back, he said. He turned, walked into the fog. The kid stood behind him, didn't follow. Rick walked until the street ended, until the fog thinned, until he found a train station. He checked the board. The next train was to Milan in 40 minutes. He had enough cash for a ticket. He bought it, sat on a plastic bench. The station was empty. The fluorescent lights hummed. He heard footsteps, slow, steady, coming from the entrance. He didn't turn. The footsteps stopped. A man sat down on the bench next to him. He was older, 50s, gray hair, a coat that cost more than Rick's pension for a month. His hands were clean. His shoes were polished. Rick looked at him, waited. The man smiled. It was a tired smile, the smile of a man who had delivered bad news too many times. You made a mess, Mr. Hanson. Rick said nothing. The man reached into his coat. Slow, careful, his hand came out with a card, plain white, a phone number, no name. He held it out. My employer would like to speak with you. Rick looked at the card, didn't take it. Your employer saw what happened in the yard. The man's smile didn't move. My employer saw everything. Rick took the card, turned it over. It was blank on the back. And if I don't call? The man stood, straightened his coat, looked down at Rick. Then you'll have a very long night, Mr. Hanson. Rick looked at the card for a long moment. The paper was heavy. The ink was black. The number was local. He slipped it into his pocket, didn't say anything. The man in the expensive coat watched him do it, nodded once, turned, walked out of the station. The door swung shut behind him. The fluorescent hum filled the space again. Rick sat alone on the plastic bench. The station clock was a minute slow. He checked it against his watch, confirmed it. The next train to Milan was in 33 minutes now. He had time. He thought about the yard, the thin man on his knees, the two bigger men standing over him, the silhouette in the office window, the foreman who had stepped back. He thought about the card in his pocket. His hand went to his ribs. The punch from the bigger man had landed clean. There would be a bruise tomorrow, purple and black. It would hurt when he breathed deep. He'd had worse. He'd had much worse. He stood, walked to the ticket counter. The woman behind it was reading a magazine. She looked up when he approached, saw the size of him. Her eyes flicked to the exit, back to him. "Leaving," she said. "Next train to Milan." She printed the ticket. He paid €31. He counted the change. €209 left. He thought about the math. A room for the night, a meal, maybe 2 meals, then nothing. He took the ticket, walked to the platform. The fog was thinner here. The air was cold and damp. It tasted like diesel and wet concrete. He stood at the edge of the platform, hands in his coat pockets. The duffel bag was still at the yard. Everything he owned was in that bag. His spare clothes, his razor, his passport. He was a man without a passport in a country that required one. He thought about that. Footsteps behind him, fast, running. He turned. Matthias was coming down the platform. His face was worse now. The swelling had spread. His left eye was almost shut. He was carrying a backpack, cheap canvas, strained at the zippers. He stopped in front of Rick, bent over, gasped for air. "I thought about what you said." Rick waited. Matthias straightened, wiped his mouth. His hand came away red again. "I don't have a home. I don't have anywhere to go. I came here because there was nothing where I was." Rick looked at him. The kid was telling the truth, or believed he was. Same thing, mostly. "So what are you doing here?" Matthias looked at the tracks, at the fog, at the empty platform. "I thought maybe you'd know what to do." Rick said nothing for a long moment. The train was coming. He could feel it in the rails, a low vibration, a distant rumble. He thought about the kid, the thin man's knife, the foreman's eyes, the men who had stepped back. He thought about the card in his pocket. "You have a passport." Matthias nodded, reached into his jacket, pulled it out, a blue cover worn at the edges. Rick took it, opened it, looked at the photo. It was the kid, younger, cleaner. His eyes had hope in them. He handed it back. "You have cash." Matthias reached into his pocket, pulled out a handful of bills, euro, mostly small denominations. Rick counted without touching, maybe €40. "That's not enough." Matthias looked at the bills. His face was hard to read. The swelling made it look like something else. "I know." The train was coming now. The headlights cut through the fog, yellow, dirty. The brakes began to scream. Rick stepped forward. Matthias stepped with him. The train slowed, stopped. The doors opened with a hiss. Rick looked at the kid, then at the open door. "Get on." Matthias looked at him, didn't move. "Where are we going?" Rick stepped onto the train, turned, looked back at the kid. "I don't know yet." Matthias hesitated, 1 second, 2. The door started to close. He grabbed it, stepped through. The train lurched, started moving. The platform slid away. The fog swallowed it. They found seats in an empty car. The seats were blue plastic. The floor was sticky. The air smelled of old coffee and stale smoke. Matthias sat by the window. Rick sat across the aisle. The train picked up speed. The lights flickered. Rick looked at the kid. The kid was staring out the window. His reflection was pale in the dark glass. "You need to clean that up." Matthias touched his face, winced. "There's a bathroom." "Use it." Matthias stood, walked to the bathroom at the end of the car. The door closed, the lock clicked. Rick sat alone. The train rocked. The wheels clicked over the joints in the rails, steady, rhythmic, a sound he knew. He took the card out of his pocket, looked at it again. The number was local. The man had known his name. The man had known what happened in the yard. He thought about the timing. The man had arrived at the station within 20 minutes of the fight. The yard was 15 minutes from here. That meant the man had left before the fight was over, or he had been close, very close. He thought about the foreman, the way he had stepped back, the way he had watched, the way he had said nothing. The foreman had known. He had known there would be a watcher. Rick put the card back in his pocket. The bathroom door opened. Matthias came out. His face was wet. The blood was mostly gone. The swelling was worse. His eye was closed now. He sat down across from Rick, didn't look at him. "How's your cash?" Rick said. Matthias reached into his pocket, counted, 42 euros. Rick did the math. 209 plus 42, 251. A room for the night, a cheap one, a meal, maybe breakfast. "We need work." Matthias looked up. His good eye was tired, scared. "What kind of work?" Rick looked out the window. The fog was thinning. The lights of a small town were passing, yellow dots in the dark. "The kind that pays cash." His pocket buzzed. A phone, not his, he didn't carry one. Matthias reached into his jacket, pulled out a cheap mobile. The screen was cracked. It buzzed again. He looked at the screen. His face went pale under the swelling. "It's them." Rick held out his hand. Matthias hesitated, then handed him the phone. Rick looked at the screen. No name, a number, local. He answered. "Yes." A pause, then the voice, calm, flat, familiar. "Mr. Hanson, you took the train." Rick recognized it, the man in the station, the expensive coat, the tired smile. "I did." "Good, we need to talk." "About what?" "About a job, one that pays better than loading trucks." Rick looked at Matthias. The kid was watching him. His good eye was wide. "I'm listening." "Get off at the next stop. There will be a car, black. The driver will take you where you need to go." "And the kid?" A pause, longer this time. "The kid can come. He looks like he could use a break." The line went dead. Rick handed the phone back to Matthias. The kid took it, held it like it was hot. "What did they say?" Rick looked out the window. The lights were getting closer, a station ahead. "We're getting off." The train slowed. The brakes screamed. The lights of the platform appeared through the fog. Rick stood, walked to the door. Matthias followed. The train stopped. The door opened. Cold air rushed in. Rick stepped onto the platform. It was small, 2 tracks, a covered shelter, a vending machine that hummed in the dark. A car was waiting at the curb, black, engine running. The windows were tinted. Rick walked toward it. Matthias stayed close. His footsteps were quick, nervous. The rear door opened from the inside. No one got out. Rick stopped at the door, looked inside. The man in the expensive coat was sitting in the back. He smiled his tired smile. "Get in, Mr. Hanson." Rick looked at the car, at the man, at the dark street beyond. He had 251 euros, a bruised rib, no passport, no plan. He got in. Matthias got in beside him. The door closed. The car pulled away. The station lights disappeared into the fog. The car's interior was warm. The leather seats smelled clean, manufactured. The man in the expensive coat sat facing forward, his hands resting on his knees. The driver pulled away from the curb without a word. The engine was quiet, German, expensive. Rick leaned back, felt the seat against his ribs. The bruise was a dull throb. He could live with it. The man didn't look at him. He looked at the road ahead through the windshield. "You're American," the man said. "Dual." "Ah, that explains the passport." Rick said nothing. The car turned onto a wider road. The streetlights were spaced wide. The fog caught the light and made it soft. "You're wondering who I am," the man said. "No." The man smiled. The smile didn't reach his eyes. "Good, that's good. Most people ask, it's wasted time." The car passed a warehouse, then another. The buildings were older here, industrial. The road was cracked. Rick counted the turns. Left, right, left again. He was building a map in his head. Matthias was pressed against the door. His good eye was fixed on the back of the driver's head. His hands were in his lap, fists. The car slowed, pulled into a yard, gravel under the tires. The headlights lit a metal door in a concrete wall. The car stopped. The engine idled. The man in the expensive coat opened his door, got out. The cold air came in. Rick got out. Matthias followed. The gravel crunched under their shoes. The yard was empty. One light above the metal door, a camera in the corner. The red light was on. The man walked to the door, pulled a key from his pocket, unlocked it. The door swung open, dark inside. The man stepped in. A light clicked on, fluorescent, it hummed. Rick followed. The room was small, a desk, 2 chairs, a filing cabinet, a calendar on the wall from 3 years ago. The man sat behind the desk, gestured to the chairs. Rick sat. Matthias stayed standing. The man looked at Matthias, then back at Rick. The kid's nervous. He's been having a bad night. That's my fault, the man said. Part of it. The men in the yard work for me. Rick looked at him. The man's face was unreadable. The tired smile was gone. They weren't supposed to go that far, the man said. They were supposed to scare him, not put him in the hospital. What did he do? The man leaned back. The chair creaked. He refused a job. Rick looked at Matthias. The kid was staring at the floor. What kind of job? The man took a breath, let it out slow. There's a container. It comes in on the night shift. It's supposed to be logged, inspected, moved to a holding yard. Sometimes it's not logged. Sometimes it's moved somewhere else. Rick waited. Matthias was supposed to help move it. He refused. That cost me time and money. What's in the container? The man smiled again, the tired smile. That's the wrong question. Rick looked at him, held the look. What's the right question? The man leaned forward, his elbows on the desk. Who wants it gone? The fluorescent light hummed. The camera in the corner was still red. I'll tell you what I know, the man said. The container comes from a shipper in Tangier. It clears customs in Algeciras. It arrives here by truck. It's supposed to go to a warehouse in Lyon, but somewhere in the chain someone intercepts it, changes the paperwork, it gets routed here, to my yard. I'm supposed to hold it 24 hours, then it disappears. Disappears how? A truck comes, different plates, different driver, it takes the container somewhere else. I don't know where, I don't ask. Rick looked at the calendar on the wall. 3 years ago. The picture was a mountain, snow on top. How long has this been going on? 6 months. And you've never looked inside? The man's smile thinned. I'm not paid to look. You're paid to not look. The man nodded. Rick looked at Matthias. The kid was still staring at the floor. So what changed? The man sat back. The chair creaked again. The container that came in tonight, it was different. The seals were wrong. The paperwork was wrong. The driver was different. He gave me an envelope, said I should open it later. I opened it. He reached into his jacket, pulled out an envelope, held it up. It was a photograph of my daughter. The room was quiet. The hum of the light was loud. She lives in Lyon. She doesn't know what I do. I want it to stay that way. Rick looked at the photograph. A woman, early 20s, smiling, a cafe in the background. Why are you telling me this? The man put the photograph back in his jacket. Because you handled yourself tonight. You didn't run. You didn't call the police. You took the kid and you got on a train. That's more than most men would do. He looked at Rick. His eyes were flat. I need someone to find out who's behind this, before they do something worse than send a photograph. Rick looked at the door, the camera, the hum of the light. What's in the container? The man shook his head. I don't know and I don't want to know, but I know someone who does. He wrote something on a piece of paper, slid it across the desk. A name, an address, a contact. She works at the port, she knows the paperwork, she knows the seals, she'll talk to you. Rick picked up the paper, read it, put it in his pocket. And the kid? The man looked at Matthias. The kid met his eyes for the first time. The kid stays with me. He'll be safe, he'll work, he'll get paid. Matthias looked at Rick. His good eye was asking a question. Rick nodded. Do it. Matthias let out a breath. His shoulders dropped. The man stood, walked to the door. The car will take you to the port. The driver knows where to drop you. Rick stood and walked to the door. He stopped, looked back. The men in the yard, the ones who hurt the kid, do they work for you? The man's face was still, unreadable. They did. And now? The man opened the door. The cold air came in. Now they don't work for anyone. Rick stepped out into the yard. The fog was thicker now. The car was waiting. The engine was running. He got in. The door closed. The car pulled away. The gravel crunched. The lights of the room disappeared into the fog. The car smelled of stale smoke and old coffee. The driver didn't speak. Rick watched the fog slide past the window. Streetlights came and went, white cones in the gray. He counted the turns. 3 lefts, 2 rights, a roundabout. The driver was taking a specific route, not the shortest, the safest. The paper in his pocket had a name, Clara Voss, an address near the port, a warehouse district. The contact worked in customs documentation. Paperwork was her specialty. The car slowed. The driver pulled over, killed the engine. End of the road, the driver said. Walk 2 blocks east. You'll see the yellow doors. Rick got out. The cold hit him. The fog was damp against his skin. The car pulled away. The taillights faded into the mist. He was alone. He walked. The street was narrow, cobblestones under his boots. The buildings on either side were old, industrial, brick and rusted iron. No lights in the windows. 2 blocks east, he counted the steps. 72. A yellow door appeared on his left, faded paint. A single bulb above it, dead. He knocked 3 times, flat and even. The door opened a crack. A chain caught it. A woman's eye appeared in the gap. You're early. Traffic was light. She studied him. Her eye moved from his face to his hands to his boots. She closed the door. The chain slid. The door opened. The room was small. A desk, a chair, a filing cabinet, a laptop. A space heater glowing orange in the corner. The air was warm and dry. Clara Voss was in her 40s, gray streaking her hair. Her face was tired, but her eyes were sharp. She wore a heavy coat over a work shirt. The shirt had a Port Authority badge on the pocket. She closed the door, locked it. Sit. She pointed to the chair. He sat. She stayed standing, leaned against the desk, crossed her arms. You're the one from the yard. He nodded. You handled the crew. The kid told me. The kid talks fast. He's scared people talk. She looked at him. Her eyes didn't blink. I've been tracking the paperwork for 6 months. The seals, the manifests, the routing, it's a shell game. The container gets a new identity at every stop. Tangier to Algeciras, Algeciras to here to Lyon, but the Lyon address doesn't exist. What's in it? She reached into her coat, pulled out a tablet, tapped the screen, turned it toward him. This is the manifest from Tangier, official, stamped, signed. He looked at the screen. The item was listed as machine parts industrial. And this, she said, is the manifest that arrives in Lyon. She swiped. Another document, same item description, different shipper, different consignee. What changed? The weight, the original says 32 tons. The Lyon version says 27, 5 tons gone. He looked at her. She held his gaze. Something's being removed between Algeciras and here. Something worth stealing. Something worth killing for. Who's doing the removing? She shook her head. I don't know, but I know when. The seal is broken at the port in Algeciras, replaced with a counterfeit. Then the truck drives to a secondary location, a warehouse, somewhere off the grid. Then it comes here, to the yard. The container is opened there. The cargo is removed. And the kid's boss, he's part of it. She nodded. He's the last link in the chain. He holds it. He doesn't look. The cargo disappears. He gets paid. He's scared now. He should be. They sent him a photograph. That's a warning. Next time it won't be a photograph. Rick looked at the space heater. The coils glowed. The fan hummed. The crew that came to the yard, who sent them? She shrugged. Local muscle, hired for the night. They don't know who's paying them. They just show up, do the work, take the money. Someone knows. She looked at him. Her eyes were flat. The driver, the one who brought the container tonight, he's the connection. He drives the whole route. He knows the secondary location. Where is he? She looked at her watch. He's on a break, 2 hours. He parks the truck at a lot near the port, the Blue Dolphin, a cafe. He drinks coffee. He smokes. He sits alone. Rick stood. The chair scraped the floor. I need an address. She wrote it on a scrap of paper, handed it to him. Be careful, the driver knows things. He's not stupid. He'll run if he sees you coming. Everyone runs. She looked at him, a long look. You talk like a man who's been in this kind of room before. He didn't answer. He walked to the door, unlocked it. The cold air hit him again. Rick. He stopped. The container that came in tonight, the crew that showed up, they came back for a reason. They wanted the kid dead. They wanted a message. He looked back. What message? That the game has changed. That someone is cleaning house. The kid saw something he shouldn't have. The boss is loose. The driver is next. He nodded. I know. He stepped out. The door closed behind him. The lock clicked. He walked east. The fog was lifting. The moon was a pale smear in the sky. The streetlights were yellow. He counted his steps. 2 blocks. A left. The Blue Dolphin was a neon sign buzzing over a metal door. The windows were steamed. The smell of coffee and fried food leaked through the cracks. He stopped across the street, leaned against a lamppost, watched. The cafe was small, 6 tables, a counter. A man in a trucker jacket sat at the far end, alone, a cup of coffee in front of him, a cigarette burning in the ashtray. The driver. Rick waited, counted the seconds. 1 minute, 2, 3. The driver stubbed out his cigarette, lit another, exhaled. The smoke hung in the air. Rick crossed the street, opened the door. The bell rang. The driver looked up. His hand froze, the cigarette halfway to his mouth. Rick walked to the table, pulled out the chair across from the driver, sat. The driver's eyes were wide. His chest rose and fell too fast. You know who I am, Rick said. The driver nodded. Then you know why I'm here. The driver looked at the door, the window, the counter, no way out. He was boxed in. I don't know anything. Rick looked at him, held the look. The container you brought tonight, the secondary location, the warehouse where the cargo gets removed. I need the address. The driver shook his head. I can't. You can. They'll kill me. They'll kill you anyway. They're cleaning house. The driver's face went pale. The cigarette burned down. The ash fell on the table. Rick waited. The driver looked at the window, the street, the fog, the neon sign buzzing. There's a warehouse, old textile mill, Rue des Forges, number 47. The truck goes there. They open the container, they take what they need, then it comes to the yard. How many men? 4 or 5, depends on the night. Weapons? Pistols, 1 shotgun last time. Rick stood, the chair scraped again. When's the next drop? The driver looked at his watch. Tomorrow night, midnight. Rick nodded. Don't make the run. The driver's eyes were wet. And do what? Leave, disappear, start over. The driver looked at his hands. The cigarette ash was cold. Rick walked to the door. The bell rang again. He stepped out into the cold. The fog was back. The street was empty. He walked. The address was in his pocket. Rue des Forges, number 47. He counted his steps. The moon was gone, the streetlights flickered. The game had changed. He changed with it. He found a bench near the canal, sat. The water was black and still. A barge was moored 50 yards down, its cabin dark. No lights, no movement. He pulled the paper from his pocket. Rue des Forges, 47, old textile mill. He folded it back, put it away. He calculated, midnight tomorrow, 18 hours. He had a bed in a boarding house 3 blocks west, €12 a night. He could stay one more night, maybe 2, then he'd have to move. He counted the cash in his wallet, €240, enough for food, enough for a train ticket if he needed one. He stood, walked back toward the boarding house. The streets were wet. The fog was thin now. The moon was a faint glow behind the clouds. The boarding house was a narrow building with a blue door. He climbed the stairs. The 3rd floor. His room was small. A bed, a chair, a sink, a window that looked out onto the street. He sat on the bed, didn't turn on the light. The room was gray with the streetlight through the curtain. He thought about the warehouse. Rue des Forges, number 47, old textile mill, 4 or 5 men, pistols, 1 shotgun. He thought about the driver, the look in his eyes, the fear. The driver would run, or he wouldn't. Either way, the address was real. The driver had nothing left to gain by lying. He thought about the kid, the boy in the container, alive, barely. Someone had wanted him dead. Someone had wanted a message. He thought about the woman, the one who had given him the address, the one who had said, "Be careful." She knew more than she was saying. She always would. He lay back on the bed. The mattress was thin. The pillow was flat. He closed his eyes. He slept. He woke at 4 in the morning. The room was dark. The streetlight had gone out. The fog was thick against the window. He sat up, listened. Footsteps on the stairs, slow, careful, 1 set, 2, 3. He stood, moved to the wall beside the door. The footsteps stopped outside. A pause, a breath, the lock clicked. The door swung open. A man stepped in, a pistol in his hand, the barrel sweeping left to right. Distance 3 feet. Angle, the man was looking at the bed, the empty bed. Rick was behind the door. He reached out, took the man's wrist, bent it backward, the pistol dropped. The man grunted. Rick pulled him forward, slammed him into the wall. The man's head hit the plaster. A crack, he went limp. Rick picked up the pistol, a Glock, 17 rounds. He racked the slide, checked the chamber, full. He stepped to the door, looked out. The hallway was empty. The stairs were dark. He waited, counted to 30, no more footsteps. He went back to the room. The man was on the floor, unconscious, a pool of blood spreading under his head. Rick searched him, wallet, keys, a phone, a piece of paper with an address written on it, Rue des Forges, number 47. He put the paper in his pocket, the keys, the phone. He left the wallet. He picked up his duffel, walked out. The stairs were empty. The front door was unlocked. He stepped into the street. The fog was thick. The air was cold. The moon was gone. He walked east. The warehouse was 4 kilometers away. He could walk it in 40 minutes, or he could find a cab. He decided to walk. The streets were empty. The city was asleep. The only sound was his footsteps on the wet cobblestones. He crossed a bridge. The canal was black. A barge was moving slowly. A light in its cabin, a man on deck, smoking. He watched Rick pass, didn't move. Rick kept walking. The warehouse district was dead, dark. The buildings were old, brick, iron, windows boarded, graffiti on the walls. He found Rue des Forges, followed it to number 47. The building was a 4-story brick structure, a loading dock at the back, a roll-up door, a smaller door beside it, no lights, no movement. He circled the block. The building had no windows at ground level. The 2nd floor had windows, but they were dark. The 3rd floor too. The 4th floor had a single light, faint, yellow. He came back to the loading dock, stopped, listened. The sound of a truck, idling somewhere inside. He tried the small door, locked. He took the keys from his pocket, tried them one by one. The third key turned the lock. He opened the door, a crack, listened. The truck engine, a voice, muffled laughter. He stepped inside. The space was cavernous, dark. The truck was in the center, a container on its flatbed. The back doors were open. The interior of the container was empty. 3 men stood near the truck. One held a cigarette, one held a pistol, the third held a clipboard. The one with the clipboard looked up, saw Rick. His hand went to his hip. Distance 20 feet, 3 men, one with a weapon drawn. The angle was bad. The truck was in the way. Rick moved left, into the shadows. The man with the clipboard shouted. The other 2 turned. The one with the pistol fired. The shot was wild. It hit the wall. The sound was loud. The echo bounced off the concrete. Rick kept moving. The shadows were deep. The truck was a barrier. He circled around the back, came up behind the flatbed. The man with the clipboard was shouting, "Where is he? Find him." The other 2 moved. One went left, one went right. They were splitting up. That was a mistake. Rick waited. The one on the left came around the truck, a flashlight in one hand, a pistol in the other. The beam swept the floor. Rick stepped out, took the man's wrist. The same move. The pistol dropped. He pulled the man forward, used his momentum, slammed him into the concrete pillar. The man hit the pillar. His head snapped back. He went down. Rick picked up the pistol, a Sig Sauer, 15 rounds. He checked the chamber, full. He moved again. The other one was coming from the right. The one with the clipboard was still at the truck, shouting. Rick circled, came up behind the second man. The man was crouched behind a stack of pallets, his pistol raised, his head turning left and right. Rick was 3 feet away. The man didn't see him. He kicked the stack of pallets. They collapsed. The man turned, raised his pistol. Rick was already moving. He took the pistol from the man's hand, broke his wrist. The man screamed. Rick shoved him into the fallen pallets. He didn't get up. The one with the clipboard was alone now. He was standing by the truck, a pistol in his hand, his head turning, his eyes wide. Rick stepped out of the shadows, walked toward him, slow, deliberate. The man raised the pistol. His hand was shaking. Distance 10 feet. The man was panicking. The shot would be wild. The angle was open. Rick kept walking. The man fired. The shot went wide, high. The echo bounced off the walls. Rick closed the distance, took the pistol from the man's hand, twisted. The man's wrist broke. He screamed. Rick let him fall. He stood over him, looked down. "Where's the boss?" The man was on his knees. His wrist was at a wrong angle. His face was white. "I don't know." Rick waited. "I don't know. He moves. He never stays in one place." "Who cleans the warehouse? Who takes the cargo?" The man shook his head. "I don't know. I just drive the truck. I just move the containers." Rick looked at him. The man was telling the truth. He was a cog, a small one. He didn't know anything worth knowing. Rick turned, walked to the truck. The keys were in the ignition. He took them, put them in his pocket. He walked out through the small door. The fog was still thick. The street was still empty. He had 3 pistols, 2 sets of keys, a phone, a piece of paper with an address. He had a dead end. He walked east. The city was waking up. A bakery was open. The smell of bread. A man on a bicycle. A woman with a dog. He bought a coffee, sat on a bench, drank it. The coffee was hot. The fog was lifting. He pulled out the phone, scrolled through the contacts. No names, just numbers, a long list. He called the last number dialed. It rang 3 times 4, a man's voice, low, scratchy. "Yeah. The warehouse is empty. Your men are on the floor." A pause, a breath. "Who is this?" "The man who's coming for you." The line went dead. Rick put the phone in his pocket, finished the coffee, stood. He had a name, he had a voice, he had a trail. He started walking. He walked until he found a bar, a working man's bar. the kind that opened early for the coffee crowd and stayed open late for the ones who couldn't go home. The door was heavy. The air inside was thick with old smoke and cheap wine. He ordered an espresso, paid with a €5 note, took the change, sat at a table in the corner, his back to the wall, the door in view. He put the 3 pistols on the table, field-stripped them one by one, cleaned them with a napkin, reassembled them. The SIG was the best. The other 2 were Glocks, functional, unremarkable. He kept the SIG, put the Glocks in his duffel. The phone buzzed. A text, no sender ID, just a number. "You made a mistake." He typed back, "Tell me where." The reply came fast, "Port Container 47, midnight." He deleted the messages, put the phone in his pocket, finished the coffee. He had 9 hours. He walked to a hotel, a 2-star place near the train station. The desk clerk was a woman in her 60s. She looked at him, looked at his duffel, took his cash. The room was small. A bed, a chair, a window that faced a brick wall. He put the duffel on the bed, lay down, closed his eyes. He slept for 6 hours, woke clean, no dreams. He showered, the water was hot, the soap was cheap. He dressed, checked the SIG, full magazine, one in the chamber. He left the hotel, walked south toward the port. The fog had burned off. The sun was low. The streets were crowded, tourists, commuters, the smell of diesel and frying oil. He bought a sandwich, a baguette with ham and butter, a bottle of water, a pack of cigarettes he didn't smoke. He found a bench near the water, sat, ate the sandwich, watched the containers. The port was a maze, rows and rows of boxes, red, blue, green, white, stacked 4 high, gaps between them like alleyways, a city of steel. He found Container 47, a blue box, rusted corners, a faded logo, a seal on the door. He walked past it, did not stop, kept walking, turned a corner, stopped, watched. Nothing moved. No one came. The sun dropped lower, the shadows grew longer. He waited. 20 minutes, 30. The light was fading, the dock lights flickered on, yellow, humming. A van pulled up, white, no markings. It stopped 50 feet from the container. The engine idled. The headlights stayed on. Rick watched. The van door opened. A man got out, tall, thin, a dark coat. He walked to the container, pulled a key from his pocket, unlocked the seal, opened the door. The man stepped back, waited. No one came out. The man looked inside, stood still for a long moment. Then he closed the door, locked it, walked back to the van, got in. The van drove away. Rick waited 5 minutes. Then he walked to the container. The seal was back in place, but the lock was cheap, a padlock, the kind you could open with a screwdriver. He didn't have a screwdriver, he had the SIG. He put the muzzle against the lock, fired. The lock broke, the sound echoed. He pulled the door open, stepped inside. The container was dark, cold, the smell of metal and salt and something else, something chemical. He pulled out his phone, used the screen as a light. The beam swept the space. The container was empty, except for one thing. A wooden crate, small, about the size of a shoebox, strapped to the floor with a tarp over it. He walked to it, pulled off the tarp. The crate was new, unmarked, no labels, no stamps. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he pried the lid open with his knife. Inside was a layer of foam, and under the foam a device, a small box, wires, a circuit board, a switch. A Deadman switch. He looked at it. The switch was in the armed position. A red light was blinking, slow, steady. He did not touch it. He closed the crate, put the tarp back, stepped out of the container. He closed the door. The broken lock hung loose. He left it. He walked away fast. His mind was cold, calculating. That was not a cargo. That was a message, a device, a bomb, waiting for someone to activate it or disarm it or die trying. He had walked into a trap. Someone had known he would follow the text. Someone had set the stage. He pulled out the phone, called the last number again. It rang once, twice, a woman's voice. Low, professional, an accent he didn't recognize, not French, not Italian, something else. Eastern, Baltic maybe. "You found the crate?" "Yes." "Then you understand." "I understand you left a bomb in a container. I understand you wanted me to find it." A pause, not a bomb, a trigger. "The bomb is elsewhere, in a place you care about." He said nothing. "You have 12 hours. Bring the crate to the address on the paper you found. Alone, no police, no interference, or the device detonates." "What device?" "The one on the train." The line went dead. Rick stood still. The train, the night shift, the container he had been hired to move. He had been carrying a bomb, and he had delivered it. He put the phone away, walked back toward the city. The lights of Marseilles flickered ahead. The port was quiet. The fog was rolling back in. He had 12 hours, and a deadman's switch in a crate. He needed a car. He needed a plan. He needed to find out who the woman was and where the bomb was before the timer ran out. He found a rental agency near the station, paid cash for a small hatchback, no questions asked. He drove to the address on the paper, a warehouse district, empty lots, broken windows, graffiti on the walls. He stopped the car a block away, turned off the engine, watched. The building was dark, no lights, no movement, a steel door, a loading bay, dead. He got out, walked to the door, tried the handle, locked. He put his ear to the door, listened. Nothing, no sound, no breath, no machine hum. He stepped back, looked up, a window on the second floor, broken, a gap large enough for a man. He climbed the drain pipe, hand over hand. The metal was cold, the rust bit into his palms. He reached the window, pulled himself through, landed on a concrete floor, dust and debris. The room was empty, a desk, a chair, a phone on the desk. He walked to it, picked it up, dead. He looked around, a door on the far wall, he opened it. A hallway, dark, narrow, he walked down it, his footsteps echoed. At the end, another door, he opened it. A room, a table, a chair, a man in the chair. His wrists were bound, his head was down. Rick approached. The man didn't move, he touched his shoulder. The man's head came up. His eyes were empty, his mouth was open, his throat had been cut. Rick stepped back, looked at the body, a warning, a message. This was the man who had left the crate. And someone had gotten to him first. He left the building the same way he came in, slid down the drain pipe, landed on the street, walked to the car. He had 11 hours now, and fewer options. He drove west toward the train station. The bomb was on a train, he had to find it, before the timer ran out, before the woman's voice became a memory. The road was dark. The headlights cut a tunnel through the fog. He drove fast. His hands were steady. His mind was cold. He had a name now, a voice, a face in a chair, and a bomb on a train. He was going to find it, and he was going to find her. And when he did, the deadman's switch would be the least of her problems. He drove. The hatchback's engine was a thin whine. The fuel gauge showed 3/4, enough for 200 kilometers. The train station was a concrete block against the sky. Lights in the parking lot, a few cars, a taxi idling. The driver was smoking, watching nothing. He parked near the maintenance entrance, cut the engine, sat for a moment. The cold crept in through the vents. He had 11 hours. The bomb was on a train. He had moved that train himself, driven it from the yard to the depot. That was 3 hours ago. He got out, walked to the gate, a chain-link fence, a padlock, no guard, the yard was quiet. He climbed the fence, landed on gravel, his boots made a sound like crushed bone. The trains were lined up, dark, dead, he counted them, 6. The one he had driven was third from the left. He walked to it, the air smelled of diesel and rust, the metal was cold under his hand. The containers were stacked on flatbeds, he had loaded them himself. A routine job, a night's work. He had not known what he was carrying. He climbed onto the flatbed. The container was a standard 40-foot, steel, gray, a serial number stenciled on the side. He had memorized it without meaning to. The lock was the same one he had sealed, intact. He took a knife from his pocket, a small blade, practical. He worked it into the seal, twisted. The metal snapped. He opened the door, a crack, then wider. The interior was black, no light. He took a small flashlight from his jacket, clicked it on. The beam cut through the dark. The container was empty, clean, no crates, no boxes, no bomb. He stood still. The cold air moved past him. He ran the calculation again. The bomb was not here. The woman had said it was on the train, but the train was empty. The container was empty. He had been misdirected, or the bomb was somewhere else. A different train, a different container. He stepped back, closed the door. The sound was dull, final. He walked to the cab, climbed in. The seat was still warm from his shift. The controls were familiar. He sat, thought. The woman had known he would follow the text. She had known he would find the crate. She had known he would go to the warehouse. She had known he would find the body. She was one step ahead, maybe two. He got out of the cab, walked to the other trains, checked them, one by one, each container, each lock, each seal. Nothing, no bomb, no trigger, no message. He stood in the yard. The fog was thicker now. The lights were halos, the air was wet. He pulled out the phone, the last number he dialed. It rang once, twice, a click, the woman's voice, low, professional. "You're early. The train is clean." A pause. "You checked?" "I checked every container, every train, there's nothing." "That's because you're looking in the wrong place." He waited. "The bomb is not on the train you moved. It's on the train you were supposed to move, the one you didn't take." He ran the calculation again. The schedule, the routes, the night shift. He had been assigned a train, he had driven it, but there had been another train, a backup, a spare, sitting in the yard. He had not checked that one. "Which train?" "The one in the repair shed, engine number 4412. The bomb is in the brake compartment. You have until dawn." The line went dead. He put the phone away, walked to the repair shed. It was a low building, concrete, a steel door. A light was on inside. He tried the door, locked. He looked for another way, a window, a vent, a gap. The roof, a skylight, cracked. He climbed a stack of pallets, pulled himself up. The glass was old. He pushed, it gave. He dropped inside, landed on a workbench, tools scattered, the smell of grease and oil. The train was in the middle of the shed, engine 4412, dark, silent. He walked to it. The brake compartment was under the cab, a panel bolted. He found a wrench, worked the bolts loose. 1, 2, 3, 4, the panel came off. He shone the flashlight inside, the brake lines, the valves, and a device, small, black, wired to the system. A bomb. He looked at it, a timer, digital, counting down 10 hours, 47 minutes, 12 seconds. He had found it. He stepped back, rubbed his face. The air was cold, his hands were steady. He could disarm it. He had training, but it was not his bomb, it was hers, and she was watching. He looked around. The shed was empty. No cameras, no microphones, but she knew he was here. She had told him where to look. He was following her script, step by step. He took out the phone, dialed. "You found it?" "Yes." "Then you know what to do." "I know what you want me to do. I'm not doing it." A pause. "You will." "No, I'll find you. I'll find the bomb, I'll find the reason, and I'll stop it." "You have 10 hours. "I have 10 hours. And you have a problem, because I'm not predictable, I'm not on a schedule, I'm not a man who follows instructions." Silence. "You're a mistake," she said. "You were never supposed to be part of this. And yet here I am." The line went dead. He put the phone away, looked at the bomb, the timer, the wires. He could disarm it, but that would tell her he had found it. That would tell her he was still playing her game. He closed the panel, left the bolts loose, walked out of the shed. The fog was thick, the lights were dim. He had 9 hours and 40 minutes. He had a name, a voice, a face in a chair, and a bomb on a train. He was going to find her, not the bomb her. He walked to the car, got in, started the engine, the headlights cut through the fog. He drove not toward the warehouse, not toward the station, toward the port, toward the container, toward the beginning. He had a theory, a thread, a name on a manifest, a signature on a form, a face he had seen in the yard. The man who had hired him, the man who had given him the job, the man who had handed him the keys. He was the first link, and Rick was going to find him. The road was empty, the city was asleep, the fog was rolling in from the sea. He drove, his hands were steady, his mind was cold. He had 9 hours, and a long night ahead. The car was a Fiat, small, dented. The heater blew cold air, he turned it off. The port was 20 minutes away, maybe less at this hour. The roads were empty, the fog ate the light. He thought about the man, the one who had handed him the keys, a supervisor, middle management, gray hair, gray coat, gray life. His name was on the shift roster, a signature on the equipment log, a face in the yard office. He had been there the night Rick started. He had given him the train. He had told him where to take it. He was the first link. The port gates were open, a guard in a booth, asleep. Rick drove through, no one stopped him. The yard was a maze of containers, stacked high, colored metal shadows. The fog made it worse. He parked near the office, a trailer, metal steps, a light on inside. He got out, the air smelled of salt and diesel, his boots on the gravel, loud in the quiet. He climbed the steps, tried the door, unlocked. He pushed it open. The man was at a desk, a coffee cup, a clipboard. He looked up, his face went still. "You're not supposed to be here. Neither is a bomb on a train." The man's hand moved toward a drawer, slow, careful. Rick took 2 steps, the desk was between them. The man's hand stopped. He was calculating. Rick was closer now, the angle was wrong. "I don't know what you're talking about. You hired me, you gave me the train, you knew which one was in the yard. I'm just a supervisor, I don't know anything. You know who pays you." The man's eyes flicked to the window, to the door, to the drawer. Rick waited. "I can't tell you. You can, or I can stand here and ask you again, and again, and again, until you do." The man swallowed, his throat moved, his hand was still on the desk. "A company, a private one, they pay cash, they never give names. They give something, a phone number, an address, a contact. A phone, a burner. I call it when they tell me to. They call me when they need something." "Where is it?" The man looked at the drawer. Rick reached, opened it, a phone, black, cheap, no screen lock. The phone buzzed in his hand, a text message. He read it. "He's with you." He looked at the man. The man was pale, his hands were shaking. "She knows." The phone buzzed again. 9 hours. Rick put the phone in his pocket, looked at the man. "Where do they meet you?" "A warehouse, near the old freight line, number 47. "When?" "Tomorrow, noon, they called before." Rick nodded, turned, walked out. The fog was thicker, the cold was sharper. He had 9 hours and a warehouse. He drove, the city was waking, a bakery open, a man sweeping the sidewalk, a bus with its lights on. He needed coffee, he needed to think. He stopped at a bar, early, a man behind the counter, an espresso machine hissing. He ordered a coffee, black, paid with cash, stood at the counter. The bar was empty, a television on the wall, news, a reporter in front of a station, a train, a bomb. He watched. The reporter said the police had found a device, disarmed it, no one hurt. He put down the cup. She had moved. She had given him the wrong train or the right one. He had found the bomb. She had told him where to look. But now it was gone, disarmed. The police had it. He had followed her script, step by step, and now she was gone, the bomb was gone, the thread was cut. He looked at the phone, the burner, the text. 9 hours. He had 8 now, maybe less. He walked out, got in the car, sat. The warehouse, number 47, near the old freight line, that was the next step. But she knew he had the phone. She knew he had the man. She knew he was coming. He was predictable now. She had made him predictable. He needed to be unpredictable. He started the engine, drove not toward the warehouse, not toward the station, toward the opposite direction, toward the highway, toward the hills. He needed to see the city from above, the lines, the routes, the pattern. The road climbed, the fog thinned, the lights of the city spread below, a grid, a network, a map. He pulled over, got out. The air was cold, the wind was clean. He looked at the port, the station, the warehouse district, the old freight line. A line, a route, a connection. The bomb had been on a train, a specific route, a specific time. She had wanted him to find it. She had wanted him to disarm it. She had wanted him to be the one. Why? He thought about the container, the one in the yard, the one he had checked, the one that was empty. It had been a decoy, a dead end, a way to pull him in. She had needed a man with access, a man who could move through the yard without question, a man who could be trusted. He had been hired, he had been used, he had been a tool. But tools can break. He looked at the phone, the burner, the text. She was watching, she was waiting, she was patient. He needed to be more patient. He got back in the car, drove down, not toward the warehouse, not toward the station, toward a hotel. A small one near the market, cash only, no questions. He parked, walked in, a man at the desk asleep. He woke up. A room, one night, cash. The man looked at him, took the money, gave him a key. Room 12, second floor, a bed, a bathroom, a window facing the street. He locked the door, sat on the bed, the phone on the table. He waited. 10 minutes, 20, an hour. The phone buzzed. You stopped. He didn't reply. Another buzz. You're not going to the warehouse. He waited. Another buzz. You're smarter than I thought. He picked up the phone, typed. I'm not predictable. A pause, longer, then. No, you're not. He put the phone down, lay on the bed. The ceiling was cracked, the light was yellow. She was watching, he was waiting, the clock was ticking. He had 7 hours, and a room and a phone and a name. He closed his eyes, not to sleep, to think. The container, the train, the bomb, the supervisor, the warehouse, the phone. A pattern, a network, a chain. She was at the top or near it. She was calling the shots, she was using others. But she was here, in the city, close enough to watch, close enough to text. Close enough to find. He opened his eyes, looked at the phone, the text messages, the timing. She had replied fast, too fast. She was watching, she was near. He sat up, looked at the window, the street below, empty, a car parked, a light on in a window across the street. He looked at the car, a black sedan, no plates, parked in the dark. He watched it, a minute, 2, 3. The engine was running, exhaust in the cold air. He picked up the phone, typed. You're in the car. A pause, then. Yes. He stood, walked to the door, opened it, walked down the stairs, out the back door, into the alley. The alley led to the next street. He walked fast, quiet. He circled the block, came up behind the sedan. The windows were dark, the exhaust was steady. He walked to the driver's side, tapped on the glass. The window rolled down. A woman, dark hair, dark eyes, a face he had seen in the chair, in the office, in the memory. You found me. You wanted me to. She smiled, thin, cold. Get in. He looked at her, the car, the street, the night. He opened the door, got in. The car was warm, the heater was on, the air smelled of perfume and coffee. She looked at him, her hands on the wheel, steady. You have questions. You have answers. She nodded, looked ahead. The fog was rolling back. The city was gray. I'll tell you everything, but not here, not now. When? Dawn, the old container yard, the one near the water. Why? Because that's where it ends, for both of us. He looked at her. Her face was calm. Her eyes were tired. He nodded. Dawn. She smiled again, thin, cold, final. He got out, closed the door. The car pulled away, into the fog, gone. He stood on the empty street, the cold air, the dim lights, the silence. He had 5 hours, and a meeting, and a woman who had all the answers. He walked back to the hotel, sat on the bed, looked at the phone. No more texts. He waited. The clock on the wall ticked. The city stirred. The night bled into gray. Dawn came slow, cold, quiet. He stood, walked out. The car started. He drove toward the water. The container yard was empty. Rusted metal, broken concrete, the smell of salt and decay. He parked, got out, walked to the edge. The woman was there, standing, her coat dark, her hair moving in the wind. She turned, looked at him. You came. You knew I would. She nodded, looked at the water, the gray sea, the gray sky. The bomb was never meant to go off. It was a signal, a message, a test. For who? For them, the ones above me, the ones who pay. Why? She looked at him. Her eyes were hard. Her voice was flat. Because I want out, and you're the only one who can help me. He looked at her, the wind, the water, the gray world. He had no reason to trust her. He had no reason to stay. But he had a question. What's the real target? She looked at him a long moment, then. Not a train, a city, a network, a system. She paused. The wind was cold. And you're the only one who can stop it. He stood still, silent. The water lapped at the concrete. He had no reason to trust her. But he had no reason to walk away. He looked at the gray sky, the gray sea, the gray city. He had a name, a voice, a face, and a bomb on a train. And now he had a woman who wanted out. He looked at her. Tell me everything. She nodded. The wind picked up. The fog began to lift. The first light of dawn broke over the city. And somewhere in a room above the port, a phone rang. A man answered. A voice said, "The American, who is he?" A pause, a file opened, a photograph. Find him. The day began. The city stirred. And Rick Hanson stood at the edge of the water, listening to a story that was far from over.